Sam Hughes. I'm the program manager of the Center for Experimental Neurotherapeutics at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And today I'm going to talk to you about 5 tips to be prepared for the informed consent conversation for clinical trials. Tip number 1, read the consent form. Seems obvious, but then you get handed a 30-page consent form and it starts becoming overwhelming. It can be a lot to digest, and the information there isn't always straightforward, but it is very important to actually read the document. And I normally tell people, regardless of what the study is that they're considering, when they look at the consent form and read it for the first time, focus on 2 main things. 1, the time commitment that it explains, meaning the number of visits, how frequently you have to come to the clinic. Is it a day-long visit? Is it 2 days that you have to commit to? Is there a hospital admission that that has to be a part of it? Do you need to take extra time off work or school? Do you need to find childcare? All of these very practical considerations that you have to take in to the time commitment to be in a clinical trial. And that's going to be different depending on the type of study it is. And secondly, also very importantly, understanding and focusing on what the risks of both the study drug are and the other procedures that you're signing up for within the clinical trial. You might be very comfortable with the known risks of a potential gene therapy, but really uncomfortable with the risks of steroids and other types of immunosuppression that you might have to have in order to get the gene therapy. So really, when you read the consent form the first time or two, focusing on those items that will impact very practically your decision making. And that leads me to tip number 2, which is to come with questions. So identify what matters the most to you that will affect your decision to enroll. What is it that matters most to you? Read the consent form. If you don't understand a term, if you don't understand a procedure or an activity, ask a question. What is this? And keep asking the question until you get an answer that you're comfortable with, that you understand. It's, there might be things that are part of the clinical trial that don't matter as much to you. You might not care as much about getting a lot of blood draws on a regular basis, but you might be terribly claustrophobic and be terrified at the idea of going into an MRI machine. So focus on those things that are going to matter to you, that are going to really impact your decision to enroll. And also be prepared that this is a decision-making process, which can be mentally and emotionally taxing. This isn't just getting information. This is getting information and then making a decision to join a clinical trial or to not join a clinical trial. And this leads me to tip number 3, which is to include other people in this decision. Enrolling in a clinical trial, no matter how big or small it may be, impacts many aspects of life. And not just your life, it impacts the life of people around you, your family, your friends, caregivers, any number of people, depending on what your support system looks like. And the more you can include your support system in your decision-making process, the more they understand what it is that you're doing and what the scope of the trial is, and also your decisions and what you care about, and why you're making the decision to enroll or not to enroll. And they're more likely to support you if you ultimately participate in the study to help get you to visits or to help cover, for other family or social issues or things that come up. So bringing key members, key people in your life, in your family, in your friend circle, into this decision-making process, they'll be there to help support you through all of the emotional and whatever mental burden that you have with this decision. I also say include trusted care providers in this decision as well. Your local primary care physician or a local specialist who's seen you for a long time, or your best friend who's a nurse, people who know the system. They don't have to be experts in the disease or in the study or in the drug, but somebody who is a care provider who you trust, who can help you logic and help you with the decision making as well. And then tip number 4, don't be afraid to say no. Don't let the study doctor or any other member of the study team make you feel pressured to participate in the study. That is a major red flag. Sometimes it might be your trusted healthcare provider that is also the investigator on the study, and you already have a relationship with them. Sometimes it might be a doctor who you've never met before in an institution that you've never been to before. And so you really need to be comfortable with the team that you are signing up and partnering with to be a part of this trial. And if you get a gut feeling that this isn't comfortable for me, I don't know if I trust them, I don't know if I can talk to them, I don't know if I can ask questions, then those are all good reasons to say, I'm not sure if this is the right study for me, or maybe the right place for me to do this study. It's okay to say no. And that can be hard sometimes because you can feel like this might be your only option, but there are always other options. If you don't feel comfortable with the study doctor and the study team that you're talking to, take a step back, see if there's another group you can talk to about the study, maybe in another location. And that leads to tip number 5, which is to always remember the consent is a process. It is not a single conversation. It can be multiple conversations. Take the time that you need to understand what the study is, what the commitment is that you're making, what the risks are, known and unknown. If you need to have multiple conversations with the study team, if you need to say, I need to take some time to process this and talk to other people, take the time that you need to understand and be comfortable with the decision that you're making. And also, consent is not a conversation or a series of conversations that lead to a signed consent form. Consent goes way beyond the consent form. At every point in the process after you enroll into a study, keep asking questions. Every interaction you have with the study team, every interaction you have with any aspect of the study, any study activities, is another opportunity to make sure that you understand the purpose and the reason and what's going on to your own ability, to your own interest, to your own need or want, and continuously try to understand what's going on. If there's a change or something isn't happening the way it was initially described to you, because things can change over time and we learn new things, even once you're already enrolled in a clinical trial. Having an open dialogue and a conversation about what the study is and how things are changing is a vital part of the consent process, even after you sign a consent form and begin the study.
My name is Jean Johnston. I'm a research nurse and study coordinator. I'm a gene therapy study coordinator at the NIH. I've been here for 15 years, and I've been with the National Human Genome Research Institute for the last 11 years. Since 2019, I've been managing a gene therapy study for GM1. I work behind the scenes doing regulatory and data management. And then I also work directly with families from the time they apply to our study, go through the informed consent process, during their treatments, and then also I manage their follow-up visits. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the challenges that participants face when going through the consent process, and also some of the actions that research participants can do to help improve the process. The informed consent is a critical and essential process in the research field. The informed consent ensures that patients have a thorough understanding of the potential risks, the benefits, and alternatives associated with the medical procedure or treatment. It allows you to make an informed decision about your healthcare. However, there are several challenges. one of the most imperative things in a research setting is that families understand their participation is voluntary. Research participants should always feel free to express their concerns. You should ask questions, and you have the right to understand all of the risks and benefits of your participation. So you shouldn't feel pressured to consent to participate in research. It is your choice to participate. The next thing is that there's a lot of complex medical information that'll be discussed in the informed consent. Healthcare providers often need to convey medical information to patients, which can be difficult to understand, especially for individuals with limited health literacy, or if you're facing a language barrier. Explaining the intricacies of a procedure or treatment in simple, understandable terms is crucial. For the patients out there, you need to ask to receive a copy of the consent form prior to your visit. And then, I know it's a lot of pages, it's a lot of jargon, but try to read the entire consent form. And as you're reading the consent form, prepare a list of questions that you have for the research team. When you actually formally consent, or before you go into formally consent, ensure that the research team plans to use a certified language interpreter if you need a language interpreter. Don't rely on bilingual friends or family members who may accompany you to an appointment. And also don't rely on Google Translate to help you through medical questions that you might have in the consent form. The next challenge is, in some cases, healthcare providers, this is especially true of a research setting, healthcare providers may not have complete information about potential risks and benefits of a procedure or a treatment, especially if the study is looking at an emerging therapy or an experimental treatment. This can make it challenging to provide a comprehensive, informed consent. Investigators need to be completely transparent about what they know and what they don't know about the risks and benefits of an experimental treatment. And it may also be difficult for families to manage their expectations about the benefits of participating in a research study. We've seen this time and time again in gene therapy study in particular. Research participants are oftentimes in an emotional state when they're going through the informed consent process. And the emotional state can affect your ability to absorb the information and make rational decisions. As time allows, it's important for you to have multiple conversations with the medical team about the contents of the consent form. And it helps if you have those conversations at different time points. Again, this is where it really helps to receive a copy of the consent form prior to your appointment or procedure. That way, on the day you meet face-to-face with the medical team to be formally consented and discussed face-to-face, you have plenty of times for your questions. Ultimately, the goal for the informed consent process is for patients to feel empowered to make informed decisions about their healthcare. It's imperative that research participants understand the risks, benefits, and know that their participation is completely voluntary. Thank you for the time that you've given to me to explain the challenges that we face during the informed consent process. This is a very important issue. So thanks.
I'm Jody Wolf, the founder of Strategic Advocacy Solutions, and I lead the patient engagement and advocacy function for Rejuvenate Bio. I've worked in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, other neuromuscular diseases, and genetic cardiomyopathies, and I am also on the ethics committee for the ASGCT. Today, I'm providing a quick take on the question of how do we consent patients for approved therapies, and what are the nuances of consent for approved gene and cell therapies? These are the questions I've been asked to address briefly today. And what we're really talking about is once a therapy is improved, we move from the context of consenting patients for a research study to ensuring that they are a participant and shared decision maker in their own care. And so it's really about a healthcare provider taking a newly approved therapy, understanding the clinical trial data and the safety and the efficacy profile enough to help the family make their own risk-benefit analysis. But now, post-approval, we're dealing with a much broader population of patients outside the clinical trial. And it's no longer a relatively homogeneous group of trial participants with pretty high health literacy. We're having to explain therapies in new ways in order to make them truly accessible to all, and not just the families that have the resources to participate in pretty rigorous clinical trials. So we have to put the supports in place to help families take advantage of these new innovative therapies and to accommodate more frequent trips to the administration site for either continued infusions for cell therapy or one-time gene therapy administration, and then the continued follow-up that's needed. But some families will need more assistance in this type of coordination, and they're no longer really having the travel supported by clinical trial funds. So that's a whole new ballgame for families. I would say there can be a lot of excitement around newly improved gene and cell therapies. So we need to manage the expectations of patients and convey as much as we know about who this therapy does and does not work for. So who are the responders and the non-responders, and how does that apply to the individual patient sitting in front of them? And sometimes we don't even have visibility to that kind of information in the drug review. Families and patients may come into a clinic visit with assumptions about the efficacy and safety of a therapy, or they may have very, very high hopes for it. The average family may think, why would the FDA approve something that wasn't safe and effective? And it's up to providers to navigate those expectations and really help families understand that there are no promises and no guarantees with these therapies. It's also, I think, important to acknowledge the limits of what we know about a therapy when consenting patients for treatment or talking about their treatment options. So some therapies may have only 1 or 2 small trials worth of data to provide the foundation for the approval. So studying real-world data in a broader population in clinical use can help us understand how a therapy performs outside of the clinical trial. But that must be shared with families when discussing treatment options. I'd also say that for a parent or an adult patient pursuing an approved gene therapy, it's unique. It may mean deciding between this option for clinical care and being a participant in future clinical trials. So currently, they could be excluded from any other clinical trials for their condition in many situations, or any additional next generation gene therapies approved for their disease. So for the most part, if you're talking about gene therapy, it's a singular shot on goal that at this time cannot be repeated. So I would say that what I've heard from families is that it's hard to understand the stress and the pressure involved in those kind of decisions, especially when you're talking about a parent making that decision for a child. And if a parent or an individual is going to put all their eggs in a first approved gene therapy basket, especially if there are serious adverse events associated. So it's a lot of pressure, and every family has to make that decision for themselves. And they also need to know that it's okay to do nothing and forego treatments. There are adult patients with a strong disability identity that may forego treatments, and parents who will choose not to pursue a gene or cell therapy. And they need the information and permission to make those choices for themselves. And finally, I would say that families will need to navigate a complex insurance landscape of small employer provided healthcare plans, government plans, and commercial insurance once a therapy is approved. So individuals may even choose to change jobs so they can get insurance coverage for these very expensive therapies. They may move to another country to get access to a therapy. They might establish care with a physician they've never seen before, or travel out of state to a center administering a therapy. And their insurance provider might stipulate that they have to wash out of other cell therapies to have access to gene therapy. So there are a lot of condition-specific nuances here that make for a really complicated decision-making landscape for patients to navigate. I'd say that all of this can lead to an immense amount of stress, pressure, and fear of judgment on the part of patients or parents. And ultimately, we just have to provide them with the best information, support, and resources necessary for them to have true autonomy to make the best treatment decisions for themselves or for their loved ones in this newly post-approval landscape. So thanks for letting me give a quick take on what happens when a gene or cell therapy is approved and how we talk with patients and consent them for treatment.